Data silos, uncovering hidden revenue and the single point of truth. In this episode, Jim Barker, Chief Revenue Officer at Cooperative Computing, explores the massive issue of data silos and why so many organisations are throwing people at problems that should be solved with technology. You'll learn how to establish a single point of truth, how to leverage a digital data hub for better decision making, and how to uncover millions in hidden revenue. I'm your co-host Anthony Pearl, and whether you're just starting your digital journey or looking to accelerate your existing efforts, it's time to get enabled digitally. Well, Jim, welcome back to another episode of the podcast, and gee, we've got some stuff to talk about. Particularly in this episode, data. It is a big thing for a lot of organizations, but I don't think they really know what they're doing with it at the moment. It seems to be everywhere. So firstly, welcome back to the program, and fill us in a little on this data problem that many manufacturing, particularly organizations, are having.
Absolutely, Anthony. Thanks for having me back. So a lot of what we're seeing going into a lot of these organizations, manufacturers and others that are very similar, is the value of the data sits in silos all around the organization. And so some of what I know you and I have talked about over the last year or so is around how do you take that valuable data and give it into the hands of the people that can actually do something with it. On this journey, we've realized we walk in and out of these organizations. We've actually got a manufacturing client here in Texas that's about a $300 million manufacturing organization. And walking into their organization, they had a lot of hardworking people. Some of the challenge they had was it felt like they just kept throwing people at problems. And as we dove in more, we realized that part of the reason they're throwing people at problems is because they don't have all their data in a place where people can actually absorb it and use it properly. So it kind of got us on this journey with them and with other clients around this challenge that exists when organizations are growing. If you just think about, growing from a 25 million to 50 million to 75 million to 100 million and on up as an organization, no matter what the organization, in a lot of cases, you adopt digital technology, you bring it in for a need to serve the business in some area of the business. And in the marketing area, that may be a marketing automation platform. In sales, it might be a CRM, and in operations, it could be an ERP or multiple different systems. And warehousing can be a warehouse management system. In a lot of cases, what organizations are doing is they're leveraging a lot of that in really good ways. Unfortunately, they stack that data inside those siloed systems in a lot of cases, and it really prevents them from truly leveraging it to make good data-driven decisions. So the things that tend to hiccup, it usually ends up showing up in some type of leadership meeting or boardroom where two different people reporting on data and their data doesn't match, and you realize, that's because Mary got it from the marketing platform, Jim got it from the CRM. That's the only reason. We all know that didn't really matter. The data doesn't match, so confidence deteriorates, and ultimately someone has to decide which one's the real truth. And so what we've done over the last few years is helped organizations go in and lay in what we call our digital data hub, that basically is allowing them to have kind of like a very intelligent data warehouse. So think about structured data that we're bringing in unstructured data in a lot of cases, converting it to structured data, and then we're also laying an orchestration layer on that. So what we're seeing when that happens is a lot of organizations are realizing the power of not only having the intelligence to make good decisions, but also being able to orchestrate the data to do different things for them, if that makes sense, which is kind of led into this whole realm of automation and everything going on around, building out digital organizations, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that you make there at the beginning, particularly around them not talking to one another. I think there's so much data that's being collected everywhere. I think in many cases they don't even know what's being collected, sure. and that's I think that's the first bit is actually understanding that, isn't it? That you are actually even. It sounds silly, but knowing actually what you're collecting.
Yeah, it's interesting to us because we'll go into these organizations, and in a lot of cases they don't even realize, and I'm talking about at the senior level, they don't realize the data that's hiding out within the organization. The minute we've gone in and prodded in enough areas, you can normally sense if there's probably an area of opportunity over here we might want to go look into. The minute that's realized, people start then coming up with the creative thinking around, oh my gosh, if we got that data internally, what else could we do with that? Oh, we could match it up with this data over here and really do some miraculous things. The challenge is in most cases, when organizations are growing like that, those siloed systems stay siloed. And what I mean by that is they may web hook between it. We in this particular case, we did a quick workaround to say, okay, let's at least take their CRM and set up some type of integration with their ERP so we could pull some data through. But at least it solved a temporary problem. What ends up happening with a lot of organizations we see is they throw more people at the data. And so they'll have 2 or 3 administrators on the ERP now, and maybe a couple of administrators on the CRM. And the whole reason that they're doing that is because there's so many other demands around different areas of, the CEO needs data to properly capitalize the business. Someone else over here needs data because they need to, there's a warehouse management system over here and someone needs that data. So there's all these different disparate systems that house this data. In a lot of cases, they throw people at the system. So they'll have 2 or 3 administrators on each one that are really responsible for just building hooks into all the other systems instead of really bringing it to a central, single point of truth and putting in a platform that allows them to take all that data and disperse it based upon the roles and permissions the way that it was designed to be shared, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's about understanding the roadmap in a particular way, isn't it? Because if they're operating in the silos, they kind of understand what is happening in one little area potentially, but how that connects and then ultimately gives you an overall strategic view is kind of everything. It's the difference between making some guesses of what might be happening versus what the reality of what is happening.
Yeah, and growing the business. We in that environment, in fact, the organization had a need. What they wanted to be able to do was when they shipped a product, they wanted to have the salesperson that sold the product call the customer and upsell extended warranty services and field services and things that they could add to the product at that point in time. What they didn't have was the data that told them when to do it or any actions or automation around getting them to do it. So if you can imagine being, 12 to 15 salespeople on this team, they're taking care of customers day in and day out and talking to new customers and bringing them on. Well, these products are shipping out the door, and as these products are shipping, no one's really following up. So their whole deal again, hey, why don't we just set up a whole different department? We'll build a team of 6 people over here. We'll put a leader and hey, by all means, that's an option for sure. The other option is, can we get the very person that sold to the customer to begin with, because they already proven they got a success track record here. Let's try to leverage them for some of that capability. And so that ultimately, the challenge that they faced in that example was, well, the salespeople don't know when the product ships, so we're going to have to give all them access to the ERP. Well, not necessarily. If we could just get the data where it needs to be, we'll know because the DRP will tell the digital data hub where it is. And then CRM can say, oh, we got a new command. We need to prompt Jim to call Anthony because Anthony's product just shipped and Jim needs to call him about extended warranty and things of that nature. And so those little things where they don't seem like they're huge, those things add up over time. And in this client's case, they had a target out there of $17 million. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's a good target on that follow-up process that before anything was in place, they were literally just logging in, each sales rep they had an admin that would log into the ERP towards the end of the day and give them a report out. The sales reps did not call until the next morning. Well, it shipped the day before, so they missed a little bit of a day, but it was okay workaround. But it's when those types of workarounds get developed, you end up having workarounds all throughout the organization. It's like unraveling those things become even more challenging. So in that environment, we were able to go in and say, okay, let's put a single point of truth in place and then let's action based upon when those things happen. When Anthony's product fires off and ships out the door, let's create an automated task for Jim that lets him know that it's due tomorrow morning. If he wants to call Anthony today, he can, but it's due tomorrow morning for him to call Anthony and say, hey, Anthony, your product just shipped. Wanted to check with you to see if you needed extended warranty, any other services that go along with it. And that's just one example of the power of the data being in a location that it can talk to the right places at the right time, and we don't have to count on two different systems talking to each other.
And I think this is a carryover, really, isn't it, of, pre-digital, if you like, with organizations that, I mean, I remember being involved in one particular a number of years back where sales and operations just didn't talk to one another. There was there was antagonism between the two. They operated in complete silos, and that it was just a core communication issue, that one didn't understand the value of the other one. And so therefore, with them operating separately, they were butting heads when they came together. And in a digital sense, that's what's happening in many organizations, isn't it? They're just they're butting heads with the digital stuff, and no one is giving them an overall perspective.
Well, in addition to that, in a lot of cases, those areas, so if you said ops and sales, sometimes the ops says, that's our systems, we own them. We're going to control them. Don't give it access to sales. Sometimes sales says, hey, that's our system, we own it. Don't give that information to ops. In a lot of cases, it's because they're afraid of what might happen if somebody gets in. Ops, I'm going to say, in sales, what does ops know about a CRM? They're going to get in and mess up my CRM. All my data is going to be messed up. I'm going to spend all this time training them. Over here in ops, they're saying, keep the sales guys out of the ERP. They're going to mess up orders. And the reality is, a properly structured organization has the ability to do all of those things at any point in time. And it's got roles and permissions built around too, so that they got full access to the data. Some of the data is view only, but they can give access to the data and make decisions based upon it. But it's all in a centralized location that gives proper roles and permissions.
I think there's a difference, isn't there, between where traditionally a lot of organizations have been at and perhaps are at the moment, is that they've got this data sitting there and they can report on it, but they're not really in a position where they can action anything because it's just a report.
Yeah, that's right. What you hit on right there, Anthony's right on. It's the orchestration of the data. Because what a lot of people want is the data first, so they can understand and see the story. What they really want, what we really, really want, is to see the story so we can create a better outcome. I want a better ending. I want better results every time. There's no one that we talk to that says, no, we don't need that good of results. We'd rather just have worse results. No one wants that. Everyone wants better results. And so it's no different than every organization on a digital journey. They're investing in it day in and day out. No one's saying, take the laptops and throw them away. Everybody, we're going back to pen and pad. No, everyone's investing in it. So everyone really wants it. It's just breaking down those silos. And it's interesting because, where digital can play a big part of helping organizations, it can also play a big part of hurting organizations. That's when you get a lot of territorial behaviors inside a certain area of an organization, and they hold on to the data so much they don't want to let it go. We've been in environments where we've had to help pry that data out of some people's hands, literally at the request of the CEO, because it's like, I got some risk factors here without that data being in those people's hands. I need to be able to share it with the rest of the organization. And ultimately, that's once it gets out and it gets to where you can access it, these days, you can orchestrate it much simpler. You get a lot of things done.
Yeah, I mean, I think, getting back to it as well, is that I imagine when you walk into a lot of organizations these days, is that what they think is the truth with their data is perhaps not really the truth. You can have a sense of rose-colored glasses around it, or if you're so close to it, you can be led in a particular way that you think it's going. But if you don't have that whole picture, suddenly the reality when you get it can be quite different.
Yeah. And it reminds me that you're never going to be right when you're forecasting, no matter what. No one's ever right on, like to the penny. The idea is give me the intelligence of the data of what I can see and understand from a historic standpoint and from a predicted future standpoint, and then let me make some educated decisions. The more data you give me, the better my decisions are usually going to be. And so the reality is, it's not about, in a lot of cases, people get a little bit hung up thinking, oh, well, hey, we made a commitment that we were going to do $240 million this year. Okay, well, where are you on that journey? We talked that journey to a client last year, became a client, a company last year that was on that journey, and they were about 190 with 2 months left in the year, and they didn't hit their 240. And so it's like, hey, you realize that those targets are set out there by design, But as we go back and ask them questions around, okay, if I were going to forecast that, what are the things that would go through my head? I realized that they had gaps in some of their answers. And it usually wasn't gaps because they hadn't thought of it. Most of the gaps were because they didn't know how to go get any of the data. And so it's really just around, hey, you probably have it hiding out. We just need to go pull it out or get to a place where you can get most of the data and you've got that gap, but at least that gap you can usually leap across and go, okay, if the elevation's here and it goes to here, we know that that gap leads us here. So we just need to get to that.
And how many times do you walk into an organization and you realize how much data that they've got, but they don't even know what to do with it? Because there's one thing when they're not when things aren't talking to one another, but it fascinates me that you often see these organizations that collect so much information in so many different ways, but you sometimes you question why. Have they got a plan for what they want to do with it? Are they just collecting it for the sake of collecting it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you and I may have spoke about this before, but this was a business transformation exercise we did with a big distribution company, about a $400 million distribution company. And they were acquiring this data from a third party that gave them a lot of competitive data. It was actually their end user customers were retail stores, and they had what represented about 30% of the sales for them and their competitors by competitor out those retail stores. And because they didn't think that they had 90% of the data, they only had 30%. They thought it was useless, but they were still spending $160,000 a year on it. And as we got into what are you doing with the data, they were going into executive meetings once a year and showing the data and saying, here's what's going on in the market. And everybody was talking about it. And they spent about an hour and 20 minutes talking through it and then moved on to something else, and nothing ever happened with the data. And it was like, oh my gosh, that's extremely valuable data that your sales team could use, that your planning team could use, that everybody in supply chain could use. There's all these different elements of very valuable data. And then the other extreme is we go into these organizations, they don't think they have any data, and it's all over the place. And sometimes it's like, okay, now into a data wrangling exercise, but it's when those are really fun for us because as we get into those, it usually takes 60 to 90 days to do something meaningful. Let's go find the data that's hiding out. Let's pull it together and see if we can create a couple of use cases that can create, some positive results for the company. The minute we can start showing that, usually people wake up and go, oh my gosh, okay, where else? What else is available to us? And in most cases, it's not because they don't have the data. It's usually just because they're restricted from accessing the data in the way that they can make really good business with it.
I think the other thing to think about here as well is there's a lot of publicly accessible data that you can get as well that can also add into the equation.
Totally. Remarkable amount of available data to us these days to go out and study things. And, if you're a business that's not using the basic analytics tools that are available to us to understand who's actually visiting your digital storefront, that's some of the easiest things available for us to go out and go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had that many visitors coming from that area of the world, staying on these pages that long because they're interested in these types of things. And so that'll only continue. The more we walk around with these devices in our pockets and have locations turned on any app, just even one, the more data is going to be available to the market.
I think it's amazing what people can find. I know I was talking to a company recently where they mapped out geographically where people were physically coming to visit them from, and they wondered why people weren't spending money, and they realized that where people were coming from was a wealthier area, and what they offered were not products that suited that demographic. And so they weren't capturing the amount of dollars that they could. Well, they opened up some opportunities there, and suddenly the revenue rose. And it was all from having this external data that actually mapped out where they were coming from and, and the times and the journeys they were making along the way.
Yeah, that's very similar to one we did for an airport here in the States that wanted to map out. They were spending millions of dollars a year on marketing, advertising for people to come park at their gates. Their gates were the second biggest form of revenue. And it was similar. They were marketing to areas, so they're like, oh my gosh, we have probably thrown away millions of dollars And it's like, hey, look, can't do anything about what happened yesterday, but at least you're getting on track now with understanding this is where I need to be concentrating my ad dollars, not in these other areas.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. We hope this discussion on identifying and wrangling your data has given you practical insights and strategies to modernize your business with confidence. To help you take action on what we've discussed, we've created a workbook for this episode. It includes questions to ask, key quotes, and action steps to help you move forward. You can find the download link in the show notes. Remember, successful transformation is a journey, not a destination. Check out the show notes for links, resources, and more details from today's episode, including how to get in touch with Cooperative Computing. In our next episode, Defining Your Digital Vision, we're taking the next step in the journey. Once you've identified those silos of data we discussed today, how do you actually decide where you want to go? Jim Barker will break down the process of working through that vision and mapping out the path to get there. You don't want to miss it. This podcast is produced by my team at podcastdoneforyou.com.au, helping professionals share their expertise through powerful podcast content. If you found value in today's episode, wherever you're tuning in, please like, share, comment, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, if you want the best from your business, you need to get enabled digitally.